No loss should be more regrettable to us than losing our time, for it is irretrievable. Zeno.
But you can't say that pizza last night was not good.
No, I think it was good. I
My
think we
problem with
liked it
deep
because we
dish,
didn't eat anything before that, though.
this is true.
Yeah,
I would have liked it regardless. That pizza was so good.
it
My
was
problem
good.
with deep dish is it's just too much for me, and then I get
Yeah,
like,
and that's so Jets, being the deep
uh,
dish one, it's not real Detroit style. It's very thick, it's heavy, and it's greasy. Real
but
Detroit
that's
style
Detroit
is
style.
like, no,
Isn't
it's
that
like
what we
air
get?
and light and like fluffy. It's very different though than Jets. You can taste Jets is very dense.
I guess I didn't try that one last night.
I'm also gonna have to redact.
I didn't know you were
Yeah,
recording.
no.
Oh, I didn't know you were recording.
You're good. You're good. Well,
Sorry.
welcome back again. As you can tell, everybody, Brit's back after completely butchering the last episode's audio with the recording. I did buy a new mic system. We're not using that since I'm too dumb to figure out how it works. So we're sharing one mic, and it does sound much, much better. Thank you for coming back.
Thanks for having me back.
And just like last time, I have a couple warm up questions. This is going to be a very hungover episode, by the way. You're currently
I
pounding
really did
coffee.
not know you were already recording.
Hmm. That's how I get them. It's a real, natural opening. So I think we'll start with the hot or nots again, then go
Okay.
into the open-ended questions. First one, I don't think I asked you this one last time, but I
Mm-mm.
highlighted it. College.
Yeah, I'm a fan, but
Maybe I
not for
did ask you this
everyone.
last
No, I
time.
don't think that we did.
Okay, I don't think so.
Yeah, but I don't think that everyone needs to go.
Hmm.
I think go if it is applicable to you, and don't go if it's not.
That's my take.
And also don't waste money going to a college that you feel like you
Yes,
have to go to for show. Like
exactly.
if it makes more sense to go to a like cheaper school,
Like my
do
thing,
it.
if I ever do want, little parasites,
Hmm.
which is really isn't good to say. I know it's the good, I know it's the right thing and the virtuous thing to have kids. But if I ever were to have kids, I'm not gonna pressure them into going to school.
Mm-mm.
Um, I think obviously, elementary school and whatnot, like that's important, or just from like a socialization aspect,
Hmm.
and to learn the basics. But when it comes to like higher education, if you want to do like the trades, you just want to go right into the workforce, that's fine.
Hmm.
Like there's a shortage of that, and I think it sort of switched that a little bit
Hmm.
to where a lot of people like enrollments were going down. That might have just been from the way everything changed about it, from just going completely virtual and still paying the same, and people kind of seeing it as a bit of a joke. But admissions did drop and have been dropping, in the past 3 years. So
Hmm.
maybe that's a sign of that. But I think you're spot on. The next one was Jimmy John's.
I hate Jimmy John's.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I had to rank all of the sub places, Jimmy John's will always come last. I think it's trash.
You're going to keep on elaborating.
Well, okay, I've only had it like once or twice because I think it's so bad, but I just feel like every time it sucks. Like the bread to filling ratio is not great.
I'll give that.
I also
That's fair.
remember it tasting very cardboardy. I don't know how else to explain it. I just think it's
Mm,
not up there
that's painfully fair.
in
Okay.
terms of, yeah,
I
a
think
little sawdust with your sub.
okay, that was another step. I think I don't. I mean, whenever I've had it, I've always been very hungry.
Okay.
I'll either have it like for work during lunch. If I do have like a big lunch during work, I'll run down and grab it, or it would be at college walking home
Hmm.
from the bars. It does smell. It smells great.
I still think you would be a Jersey Mike's person.
Yeah, I have a gift card,
Hmm.
$25 gift card from work. I need to drop there. Maybe today'll be the day. We'll see.
There you go.
Um,
I would get
I
Subway before getting Jimmy
see.
John's.
No, you lost
Like,
me
I think Jimmy John's is
there.
that bad.
There's no way. It's
Hmm.
not that bad. Subway's really bad.
No.
I get what you're saying with the bread to, filling ratio.
Hmm.
That bread and
I think it's mostly the taste too. Like that. I don't know.
I don't know because I get what you're saying with the taste because I think the bread to filling ratio is so off. You do get that sort of really bready, sort of dry sort of bite. I get that happens. I will say their kettle chips are some of the best kettle chips ever
What's
made.
the brand?
They're just they're Jimmy chips.
Oh, they have their
Yeah,
own?
I don't know if they probably outsource it, but
Yeah.
they're branded as Jimmy Chips. The
Well, I hate you when they don't.
jalapeno Jimmy Chips, you got to put those in the sub.
It's probably the same brand that all the other sub places have. They just paid to put their
Probably, but
name.
it's good. You need to
I
get the
can't give them
jalapeno
points for
Jimmy
that. I'm
Chips and
sorry.
put it in your sub. It'll change the sub completely. What was your go-to order?
I don't even remember. It's been so long since I've had.
That's fair. You are a
I also,
recovering
yeah,
vegan.
you have
Yeah,
to understand it.
yeah.
It's probably been like 10 years since I've had a sub place in general, and probably even longer since having Jimmy John's because it's
Well,
so
maybe
bad.
there's a net there. It's gone. Maybe then Jersey Mike's will be.
I do remember liking Jersey Mike's.
I don't. I don't know they were a thing for that long.
No, but I think I had it more recently.
Oh, okay,
Hmm.
cool. Then maybe no Jersey Mike's. I'll save the gift card for myself. And the last hot or not, IPAs.
No, I hate
Thank
IPAs.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I hate them.
I can't stand them either. The one, I'll actually, so I'll redeem one here. The, oh, I'm forgetting it now. M43.
I don't know.
M43 is pretty good. Comes like a tall boy can. There's a lot going on, which makes it a little more interesting than just that typical bitter sort of IPA thing. I don't think they're very good though for the
No,
most part.
they're not my style of beer. I
No.
don't like them.
You are a Christmas ale girl?
Okay, I love Christmas ales and Oktoberfest beers. Those are so good,
Hmm.
but I could not drink them year round. Like I'm glad they're a
That's fair.
seasonal thing.
I like Oktoberfest beers.
Hmm.
Deep, like a darker sort of fall beer. I
Yeah.
like that a lot.
To drink casually, I would do like a wheat beer or
Oh
Mexican
yeah,
beer.
Mexican beer all
Yeah.
day for me. Yeah, Dos Equis,
Hmm.
Modelo. Modelo's having a bit of a moment right now with the Bud Light.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
forgot. I saw the number yesterday. They just did earnings, and it's like 320 something $1 million hit that they took from just the
Wait,
boycott.
Modelo or Bud Light? Bud
Bud
Light,
Light.
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Gee.
Well, when you're seeing like grocery stores sell 30 racks for $3,
Yeah.
it's bad.
I can't believe it
It's
got
crazy.
that out of hand.
It's it's wild. But I do think it's less so a yes, I do think political like bodies like jumped on it and used it to push an agenda.
Hmm.
I think and the CEO or whoever was on the Bud Light earnings call said it. It was like the feedback we've gotten is that people just want to enjoy their beer without like a message.
Hmm.
And I completely agree with that. Like I spoke on that when I actually uh, pulled portions. I was reading portions of like the Unabomber manifesto
Hmm.
as he explains, why we react to certain things or why we think or how we perceive things today. And people are just tired. There's no more room for it, like in their
Hmm.
lives. When they get home from their meaningless job, sitting in front of a computer all day under like fake lighting, doing nothing to better themselves really, or even the company. Maybe they're just like a small part of the bureaucratic process, and they go home completely exhausted. They want to sit down and do something that doesn't give them purpose or like make them better at all
Hmm.
anyways. They just want to like do something that they want to do, that they have some sort of autonomy over. And when they turn on the TV and they're seeing all this agenda, whether it be from the news, from football, from whatever, they're just like, I don't have time for this anymore. I don't have to put up with this. Like I
Hmm.
think people are just tired of it. They just want to watch football, they just want to drink a beer and not worry about any sort of political messaging.
Hmm.
So I think this next election is gonna be very interesting.
It is going to be. My problem with companies are like Bud Light when they do stuff like that and then they get bad backlash is they completely abandon
Oh yeah.
whatever person they had doing the ad or
Yeah.
campaign for them. So like that person got completely fucked. And there's another
Yeah.
thing going on right now where there's like a transgender person was a face of a company for something and
Oh,
took a lot of backlash and the company came out and said like this is it's not that big of a deal. Like this is just the person
yeah.
that we wanted to have for the
Right.
campaign. So I have a lot of respect for them for standing by like it's totally fine to not have a message in every single ad,
Yeah.
but I think on like
If
the Bud
you
Lights
built
end,
a
like they
brand,
need to
yeah,
then stand by that person and be like, look, we hired them for the ad. It's not their fault because then they get wrecked
mhm.
when they really had nothing to do with
And
it.
that's the thing. If Bud Light originally started as a beer company for, the transgender, the LGBT community, then like that would have made sense. You wouldn't have had the backlash again. So, and if there was a company that started like that and then they just completely like railroaded that person, then that is messed up. So Bud Light had no business messing around in that realm. And they ended up just complete. And I don't even know if the actual influencer got too much heat. I think most was pointed at Bud Light. I think I'd like to imagine. I'm sure there was a
I
couple of
think they took quite
rednecks
a bit of
who
heat.
took at
Yeah.
pitchforks and torches towards the influencer. But I'd like to think the majority of people were smart enough to burn down Bud Light. What was the other
But
company though?
it was a makeup company. That's why, yeah.
Oh, okay,
Hmm.
gotcha. That's that's interesting too, though.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think people are just tired.
Yeah.
That's fair. And then I I don't know which one of these open-ended questions to start with
Okay.
because one's a lot. Let's go with, were you an English or a math kid in school?
Both.
Surely you preferred one over the other.
No,
Really?
no, I loved both. I, well, I obviously was like more of a math kid. I feel like
Okay.
that was always my thing,
I
but
figured because of engineering.
yeah,
Yeah.
but English was that was my creative side and almost my like escape, from all the like annoying math stuff a bit. I loved them both, but I think I loved English so much because I had these two English teachers in high school.
That's gonna be my next question.
Yeah, and they were phenomenal, and they ended up making this, like, break off class, and it counted as a college course for us, but it was, like, Great in Modern Works or something,
Okay.
but and, like, not everyone you had to, like, apply to get in this class, it was a
Sure.
whole thing. So it was, like, a smaller group of kids, and we just read really good books and would basically just sit around and have roundtable
So the
discussions
smart
about
kids
them.
got to just,
Well, that's not what I'm saying,
go
but
on their own
it
and get
was
college credit.
but it was so much fun. So I think for me, it was such a fun place. And I've always been a reader. Like growing up, I was always in the library and yeah. So I loved them
I
both.
wasn't until the pandemic, and I still hold that those first two
That recently,
summers, yeah, I never used to read for fun, really.
that surprises me
Um, well, I mean,
because now you're such a
now
reader.
probably, yeah, but I was like, it's similar to how I view golf.
Ugh,
I used to view reading like that. I was like, I can do this when I'm
you don't
older.
need to come around to golf.
I don't need to waste my time doing this shit. Like, I'll read when I can't do anything else. And then those first two summers of the pandemic, which are still probably my favorite summers
Hmm.
because work from home, I just sat up by the pool all day. And if I didn't have a meeting, I was reading a book just outside, enjoying the sunlight. I was working out too. Like, those summers were the best summers. And I really got back into reading then, because you'd sit outside for a while and enjoying the sun is great, but I kind of want something to do. And like, I listen to podcasts, but then like I fall asleep and I
Hmm.
miss it. And I was like, you know what? There's some good books out there. I'm gonna pick up one. I forgot which one I picked up first that really kind of kicked everything off, and I just kept buying more and more and reading. Um, but yeah, I wasn't a math kid either
That
though.
surprised me. Actually, I was gonna say I didn't really like math when I was
I
younger.
hate math. I hated math. I hate math, and I'm in finance.
Great.
Yeah,
Gives me a lot of confidence
yeah.
in what you do at work.
Excel does the math for me. I
Yeah,
just
that's
gotta know
fair.
how to do a VLOOKUP.
There you go. Yeah, I think I didn't start liking math until I got older.
Yeah, I mean, fair
Mm,
considering your job.
yeah.
Yeah. And so your favorite teachers, it sounds like it was your English teacher then, or one of your English
Yeah,
teachers.
probably one of
Okay.
them.
That
And
was gonna be my
then
second question, yeah.
my math teacher was
Oh,
this
okay.
lady was a tank. Like she was the most fit woman I've ever seen in my life. Like she would be in the gym, like when we would, be in there for like sport training and stuff, just absolutely like crushing it, demolishing. Like this lady was the coolest lady. And then she was so smart. She also was kind of terrifying. Like you did not piss her off or mess around in her class. But yeah, she was up there. And then probably those two English teachers.
Speaking of beasts of teachers, when I was in eighth grade or seventh grade, it was in the same school, but and you went to different classes around that time, but if she was like our home sort of like, teacher.
Mm,
Again, I want to say it was probably eighth grade. She was a nun. It was a private school, private Catholic school, and tank. Um, Scary, very scary. And like she would tell stories like, before she became a holy woman or whatever. And she was a fucking bully. Like she
really?
would beat people.
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
And she was telling some stories. She was like hitting some kid with like a chain at one point. I forgot for what or how it even got that way. She was missing fingers
Jeez,
too. Like
Jesus.
I think she was like a gang member. Like she was a part of like the mob before she became a nun, I think. Like they took her fingers for initiation or something. It was crazy.
Who is this
I
woman?
don't
Oh my
know.
god.
Yeah, she was terrifying. I was always an English kid. Didn't like reading though. but
Mhm.
I liked writing a lot. I
Yeah.
still do like writing a lot, and grammar was another thing that I was just really good at it. We had a teacher who really hammered that home in high school as well. Um, English was like the highest scoring on the ACT for me. I got
Mhm.
perfect like English score. Not that really matters considering I'm not trying to flex my ACT, test taking ability because it's not that good. Only English is that strong. Um,
That's your fun fact about yourself when
Perfect
meeting people.
score in the English portion of the ACT, and everything else was shit. I'm trying to think. Yeah, it was definitely English. There was just that same English teacher actually was obsessed with Bob Dylan though.
Oh, okay.
And
That
I
makes
really,
sense now.
listen. I appreciate what he did for the electric guitar.
Mhm.
Um, I don't like Bob Dylan. I
Wait,
don't.
really?
I can't
That's not what
stand
I
Bob
thought you were gonna
Dylan. No,
actually,
I cannot
that
stand him.
tracks. It's probably too folky.
My other hot
Mm,
take is I really don't like the Beatles all that much.
I know you don't.
Again, in a similar like sense, I respect what they did for rock, but I just don't like a lot. I don't like most of their music.
It's fine.
Yeah.
The Beatles are nostalgic for me.
But anyways, what he would do he was a senior year English teacher in high school. What he would do was he loved Bob Dylan so much he would have everybody pick like a Bob Dylan song. And again, these are like really small class. I graduated with like 120 kids. He'd have someone pick a Bob Dylan song, and you'd have to write this huge like paper about it and what it meant, from a historical sense, from a literal sense, write a huge paper about it, and then you would have to perform it in front of the class. So you can sing it, you can bring an instrument, you can do whatever. And he would like sit there in like hippie attire in the back of the class. He came in one day like a fro and like the big like circle glasses, and he'd say we were in whatever New York village. He'd be performing in a coffee shop or whatever, and he was just absolutely
Wait,
hilarious.
this is so
It was
cool.
it was so funny. Obviously, me being such a shit singer, I had to lean on my limited guitar experience at the time. So had an acoustic performance
This is
for
also
actually
kind of traumatic.
if you brought in an instrument, there's extra credit too.
Oh,
So
nice.
I wasn't gonna go, which honestly is easier than just going straight a
Wait, did you
cappella. I
also
figured.
sing?
Oh yeah, oh
Is there
yeah.
footage of
No,
this?
God, no. He would not. There's no way that was allowed there. If he saw a phone out, he was probably throwing it out the window.
Okay.
That was another thing too. This was on like the second or third story of a very old brick building, and it had the external like red fire escape stairs. And so during a test, usually the first or like the first time he'd do this, whenever he stepped out of the room for a test, he would like he only did this once because he didn't know it was coming. But at one point, he'd hand out a test and he'd just quietly like leave the room, and people would be like, "What an idiot!" and start cheating. And what he'd do, he'd walk up like the fire escape stairs, like the open window in the back,
Stop.
and he'd like wait to see somebody cheating, and then he'd just yell at him through the window. Yeah, he was a funny dude. He's a really funny dude. I had another teacher though who's definitely my favorite, who really kind of got me into like writing, and writing well. But yeah, always been English, and
Hmm.
probably my favorite teacher was that guy. Um, and the last question I had, this one's out there, okay?
Okay.
It's a real thinker. Probably should have opened with this one. This really
Okay.
gotten the gears going. But I've asked it once before, might have been to myself in just one sort of portion towards the end of a video. Um, it's called the orangutan ultimatum. And I heard it first on the Coney like YouTube stream. I forgot how it came up, but essentially you have to pick one scenario to live with for the rest of your life. The first one is every time you start your car, a goblin, like a little goblin, appears somewhere in the car, and before you go, you have to dispatch the goblin before carrying on with your day.
Is dispatch code for
You have to kill the goblin.
okay.
Yeah. The second is once a year, at a random time, in a completely random location, an orangutan holding a sword just materializes in the world and hunts you down, and you have to kill it. You're free to ask
Those are my
questions.
two options.
Yes,
I choose the first one 100% because I hate orangutans. Not hate them, but I get a little weirded out by them.
that's fair. Why's that?
Maybe it's just because they're so human-like.
It's like any monkey, though, isn't it?
Yeah, so and I don't like
I
monkeys.
don't either. I think they're
Yeah.
terrifying.
So I don't want one appearing to me
No,
randomly at any
definitely not.
time. So I'll choose the first one.
That's fair.
Wait, but it's every time I start my car?
Every time you start your car. So that's at least twice a day if you're going somewhere.
I walk and bike a lot,
Oh,
you
okay.
know?
Yeah, that's fair.
I'll get out of it.
Yeah, that's definitely an option. I'm going with the orangutan.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
The only time, I mean, the only thing I'd have to do to really change up my schedule to survive it would be just to fly with a parachute. Because I mean, worst case scenario is it spawns when you're on a
On a
plane.
plane.
Yeah. Other than that, I feel pretty good. But again, the chances of that, because it's a random time in a random location, it doesn't spawn like right next to you. So I mean, the odds of that are very, very slim, but not zero, to have it spawn on the plane while you're in the air.
Oh, so there's a chance that it can appear but not be
It can
near
it can
you?
appear on the other side of the world. You just don't know.
Well, that is a better deal than the first one. If it appears and it's not even near you,
But it's
but
like
it's coming for
honing.
You.
Yeah, like it tracks you down
That's
constantly
terrifying.
until you
To
kill
think
it.
that this orangutan is just tracking you
Yeah, it's like
down.
a John Wick
Yeah.
orangutan. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, okay, I'm sticking with the first.
that's fair. No, I feel like I'm pretty well equipped in my day-to-day life to dispatch a monkey holding a sword.
Yeah, probably.
Again,
But orangutans can be big and they're
yeah,
very fierce. I don't know. I would
yeah.
not want to go up against one.
I wouldn't either, but I think I do it once a year. That every time I start
Hmm.
my car, because like one in the morning,
Ugh, not in God
I'm
and
not
killing
in.
mode.
Usually I'm leaving a little too late for work anyways. I don't
Hmm.
want to be like before I put the key in and go.
Fuck, gotta kill this thing again.
Okay, here we go. Don't need that. Or imagine, imagine like you're picking someone up, like you're meeting them first time on a
Hmm.
date. You get in the car before you start. You
Like,
listen.
wait, hold on.
I'm gonna turn this key, and we're gonna see some things. That'd be wild. But no, I even with that, I don't want because I love my car so much. I take my cars like so much everywhere. So I'm going with the monkey.
That last scenario would be a problem for you, not for me. If I'm ever picking someone up to go on a date, I'm not going on the
That's true.
date. So I have no,
Mm,
yeah,
very fair. Very, very
that's
fair.
more,
I
yeah,
didn't consider that. Yeah. Yeah. But anyways, we went shooting last time
we did.
you were here, and that was the first time I believe you really shot like a handgun.
Hmm.
You're a farm
And
girl though, so you have experience shooting
a
other.
shotgun, but never a
Okay,
rifle either,
gotcha.
which I feel like are quite different. I
Yeah.
don't
Oh
know,
yeah,
still, yeah. But yeah, never
definitely.
a handgun. That
But
was first time.
I guess so. We went through the basics of just like grip,
Hmm.
stance, target acquisition, and like the actual mechanism of like isolating the motion of pulling the trigger.
Hmm.
And I think the main takeaway that I found when I first started really shooting a pistol seriously was how hard it is to hit anything.
Yeah,
And we were
I was
only
surprised.
maybe what? How many? 7, 8 yards?
Yeah, a little
Maybe
further.
10
I would
yards
say
away
10.
from a little like steel sort of like gong target.
Hmm.
And it's not easy at all, is it?
No, it's not.
No.
I was surprised at how difficult it
Hmm.
was. And I think I was just so afraid to even shoot it at first.
Well, sure.
I don't know why,
And
but
that's one of the main things that make people inaccurate is anticipating
yeah.
that recoil. People like they tense up, they try to compensate for it in the act. And so and the main thing people preach to do is to just get used to pulling that trigger so slowly that the recoil almost like surprises you.
That helped a lot, but and I think that's why I was missing so much in the beginning because
Hmm.
I would pull it and like I could feel myself pulling back from it a
Yeah.
bit. Um, and then by the end, obviously, it was getting like better at hitting it. But I think in the beginning, that's why I felt like I could never hit it because I was almost afraid of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that tip about like slowly pulling the trigger back, I think that helped a lot.
And it's cool too because now I feel like most people who, maybe own a handgun and just maybe carry it but don't really shoot it regularly don't fully understand the concept that there are multiple like stages or like walls to that trigger.
Hmm.
Like you felt that there was quite a bit of slack to pull up before you felt some resistance in that, and that concept in and of itself is a huge one to really understand to be able to shoot accurately.
Hmm.
So I think that was cool. A lot of people just like slap the trigger, really just pull it all the way through as hard as they can, and that obviously is gonna throw everything off. But you got some experience behind a pretty good gun too. So,
Hmm. Yeah, it was fun.
and then I completely ruined ARs for you,
Yep.
like an idiot. I completely ruined that experience.
It wasn't your fault. And I think because we were getting a little too cocky because, well, what was the one that I was
You
shooting?
were shooting the you had a suppressed AR-9.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
was getting kind of good at shooting that one. So then when you wanted to get out the next one,
yeah.
I think we both were just too
Well,
like, this is
yeah,
going fine.
I started you with the pistol
Yeah.
because I was like, it's a small looking gun. It seems approachable. The recoil's minimal, um, and the concepts, generally they're similar concepts. You pull the trigger, you feel it kick, empty brass shoots out, new rounds put in the chamber, and you pull the trigger again. The concepts apply differently to different, weapon systems, but the way it works in your hands is the same. So I figured I'll start with the smaller one, it's a little more approachable, should be easier. We'll go from there, and then plus the trigger pull sort of mechanics work the same across all platforms. So like, we'll start there.
Hmm.
You got, you're comfortable shooting that, you like shooting that, and I was like, okay, we're gonna shoot the exact same round now out of a longer gun, which is good. It looks a little more intimidating because it's bigger, but it's suppressed, so it's very quiet.
Hmm.
Um, did well with that, and then I was like, all right, here's a 16-inch AR, and I put it in your hands, and I was like,
With no suppressor.
no, yeah, I have one again. It's been over a year. I'm waiting for it to come in now. The ATF is still processing my electronic form 4, a bunch of idiots. And I was like, this is the exact same system as the AR-9. The
Yep.
safety, the trigger, the magazine, everything works exactly the same, just a bigger bullet. But it's a longer barrel. It actually, the recoil itself should be equal, if not maybe less than the suppressed AR-9, only because the mechanics of the AR-9 system itself and the suppressor push all that gas basically back into you more. It's a different. The recoil is higher when you suppress something. And but anyways, I'm gonna go a little too autistic with that. And I was like, this should be fine. There's a really, I forgot which company makes it, but it's just a wicked compensator on the end, which
Hmm.
is like the muzzle device. It's not a suppressor, but the way it's designed, it's to a lot of the gas is to exit the barrel in a way that mitigates the recoil, really. So it's very stable when you're shooting it. However, I handed it to you. I saw it was a little heavy in your arms, and I was
It
like,
was
"Let me take
significantly
this. I'm gonna
heavier.
take this. I'm just gonna, show you where to put your arms. I'll like bring the stock in a little bit. Here's how you hold it. Pull it in your shoulder like this, and then I fired it with you right next to me, and where like the comp was essentially. So you got the full
Hmm.
concussion from that shot, and you were easily standing in like instead of right in front of it, you were standing in the second worst spot
Yeah.
to be standing when I shot that thing. And I think that was probably too much.
It was, and it was already bad because I remember you gave me that one, and I was like, okay, this feels significantly
Hmm.
heavier. It just feels like it's going to be harder
I
for
was
me to
thinking
control
too,
this one. And I even said to you, like, I don't know that I want to shoot this
which is
gun.
which is good, which is good for you
Yeah.
to say. I'm not comfortable. I need to take a step back. That
Yeah.
was
So
good.
then I wanted you to shoot it first. Like, I just wanted to
Hmm.
see how much it recoiled and all of that. And then hearing it, and I was already nervous to shoot it. I already felt like my issue was I felt like I wasn't going to be able to control it very well
That's fair.
just
Yeah,
because it was so heavy. Like, it was hard for me to hold. And yeah, that it ruined it for me.
that's very fair. No, I was like, oh, that was dumb. You should have started,
Yeah.
10 or so yards behind me. I should have shot it. You should have approached then to get used to the sound, but we learn.
Yeah, I think what got me is you were like, the sound's not going to be much different than the other one. It was so different. Well,
I
but the other
didn't.
one has
If I
a
said that,
suppressor, I
that
guess.
was a mistake. I would think I was trying. What I was
Maybe,
trying to say, the recoil should be pretty
maybe
close.
that's what you were
Yeah,
saying. Yeah.
yeah. Oops.
Hmm.
So next time we're out there, we'll start. We'll do the same thing. You shoot the pistols, shoot the suppressed AR-9 again, and then I have a I showed you the Vector,
That's the,
the funny looking
yes.
square angular one.
Hmm.
That shoots a little larger round than like the 9 millimeter pistol round, but it's not suppressed either. So shoot the Vector for a little bit, and then the AR is that one I gave you is the next step up from that
We'll
basically
see.
because it's yeah. I have shorter barrel ones that shoot. Actually, no, I think the shorter barrel 7.62 that I have, it shoots the. Again, I'm going to get into more guns here, but
Hmm.
the AK-47 round essentially is what that'll take.
What is that compared to the two that?
I'll bring out I can show you the casings, how they look a little different, how they compare. The 7.62. So we were shooting what was coming out of the AR-15 that day was 5.56. Is the standard. It's been the standard like NATO military round, and you saw how large the I guess the casing compared to the actual projectile was on that. That small round travels very, very quickly, and there's a very large like powder load to that, which is why it was so much louder. The 7.62 by 39 round, which is the AK-47 round, that ratio is very different.
Mm.
The actual projectile is much larger. But the casing's pretty large too. The round does not travel nearly as fast though, but the barrel on the 7.62 rifle is shorter, so it's gonna be a little louder as well because of
Okay.
that. There's less room for the gas to actually, dissipate
Effect
through.
out.
Yeah, and then I have 308, which is the big sort of round, and that comes out of a 20-inch rifle. So that thing, yeah, that's the fun one. But that one actually kicks. That one you're gonna
I
feel
don't
that
know
one.
how I
You're
would
gonna hear
even
that
hold
one.
that one.
You probably couldn't, and you can try it, but it's a very large. I got a bipod on it though, so you usually lay down, you put it on a table or something.
Oh, okay.
For me, the way it's set up, I got the scope set up on it. It's designed to more like long range shooting.
Mm-hmm.
So what the others can't touch, that's really what that one's for. And I got to get out more with that one. I built that one, and I was like, I need a gun that I can, reliably go out far with. And I got it. I got the scope zeroed into like 100 yards, and I was like, all right, good enough. And it just kind of is sitting in the safe, so I got to get more used to
More
that
use
one.
out of it.
Yeah, that's a fun one though, but that one's very loud.
Mm-hmm.
So
I can imagine.
maybe we'll get you used to
I'm
the
gonna
other
pass
ones
on that
first.
one.
Yeah,
For now.
yeah. But
But by the end of it, like I was enjoying it
yeah, you
because I was
were,
getting better.
yeah.
So
That suppressed AR-9 seemed to be your go-to.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
And I even said like next time I want to try on the smaller target with that one. Like I feel like I was getting very
Yeah,
accurate with that
I gotta
one.
get, I texted my dad, we gotta get some equipment out there and kind of
Clean that
cut
up.
down that overgrowth because that galley goes out, that kind of carve out in the trees goes out to like 100 something yards. And we
Oh
have
wow.
like hangers for different like steel silhouette targets. And then there's a large backstop at the end of that too, where he's got targets set up where he kind of zeroes in his hunting rifles. So yeah, we gotta get back out there and clean it up for him. Um, but that's a cool spot we have.
Mm-hmm.
Wish it was a little bigger, but
No, it was
it
good.
does the trick.
Yeah.
Yeah. You did mention, okay, we talked about the paranormal last episode. You
Oh
did
yeah.
mention you have another story though you forgot to tell.
Yeah, I
Also,
forgot
do you
to
want me
tell.
to warm up your
Oh
coffee?
yeah, are we?
Yeah, I'm probably gonna combine
Yep, go
these.
for it. Yeah, this is a quick story. It's not
Yeah, go
anything
for it.
too crazy,
I'm just
but
gonna heat this up.
I used to when I first moved like to the area, lived in a kind of older house. Um, really beautiful, like rented it at a great price. And I feel like now I see why, because
Landlord special.
that landlord special, because every night between like 3 and 4, I would wake up to my dog just like demon growling at my closed closet door. And it was always in the same, like in my bedroom. And he's a little dog, he's not that big, but he would make this deep, just vicious, like from his belly growl at this door. Who knows? I mean, obviously, nothing really ever happened in that house. It was just he felt like there was something in the closet, I guess.
You didn't stick around long enough to like make sure
I
nothing happened in the
I didn't
house.
stick around long enough. To be fair, I moved out of that house early.
Fair.
Hmm.
No.
Maybe my dog's the problem.
Hmm.
Maybe he
Animals
could be
have a
the one
way
that's
of like
haunted.
they're like super sensitive to that stuff
I
though.
know. That's what creeps me
Allegedly.
out.
I haven't had a paranormal animal experience, so I wouldn't know.
Really?
No, no.
I feel like your cat sees ghosts.
All cats are schizophrenic. That's just how they are. Um, no, yeah, I mean, there's that one in the story I told last time as close as I got. That's about it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, my cousin's dogs running around the house barking at nothing. Um, yeah, I don't want this big paranormal. Actually, no. You might be the ghost lady. Every time you come on, you share a new paranormal thing.
I think now I might be out of stories.
That's good.
Unless something new happens
Hopefully
between
not.
now and the next time, but hopefully not.
Yeah, I don't need to deal with that.
I don't need to deal with that.
That's fair. I don't is pretty well known for. We're going to have to censor
Yep.
that out. Yeah. Yeah. There's some areas around here that are very well known to be tied to
Maybe
very
haunted.
specific sort of like cryptids or like
Hmm.
other, scary things. So there's a very large Bigfoot following out here
There is.
and Dogman.
Yeah. Oh,
Big
yeah. That's
Dogman
big here
following out
too.
here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of Native American activity though,
Hmm.
or prior Native
Where
American
I'm,
activity.
yeah, true. Where I'm from, it was a big Native American,
Really?
yeah, like territory originally. So maybe that's where all my
Mm,
ghost stories come from.
yeah. I do want an episode where I think get a couple guys out and just go like overlanding. You finally set up a Jeep to take a tent or just go camping somewhere and just call it like the hunt for the dogman or something. Just make a funny episode out of it.
You're like the Blair Witch Project. But
Basically,
yeah.
yeah, just set up camp. I think it'd be really cool to do like one out in the wilderness, you know. I think that'd be really
Oh, that
sweet.
would be really
Yeah,
cool.
I'd love to set that up again. So, or set that up, not again. Um, I just want to go camping in general.
You want to go camping?
Yeah.
Yeah. You have a good setup for it too with the Jeep.
Jeep needs some love.
Hmm.
That that heat shield's making noises and it's not getting any better. It's only the heat shield though. It just sounds way worse than what it is. It's just a wicked rattling every time I stop and go.
What time of year do you prefer to camp? Because I feel like now it's kind of
Too
getting,
hot.
yeah.
It's too hot in the summer.
Hmm.
I
Or
think
in the
the fall
fall.
would be really cool. I think the fall would be perfect.
Yeah.
Fall or spring maybe. I mean maybe sometime, I mean, last night it got a little cool, 60.
Yeah.
60 at night's good, I think. It's a good
But that's
time.
been rare for
Oh, it's raining again.
around here right now. Like I feel like it's been staying high 70s in the evening
80s.
usually.
We're getting
Yeah.
high 80s now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the heat wave.
Oh, yeah.
Garbage cans aren't melting here like they are in Arizona, but it's been I like it though. I like the heat, because I hate the cold winter too
Hmm.
much. So I know you're a Christmas girl, but I
I
I can
am.
take snow and the whole Christmas music thing for maybe a week. And then I'm like, cool, got it. Let's move on.
I can handle it for longer, but I do reach a point after New Year's where I start to get pretty over it.
That's fair. Yeah, because like that January, February
It's so
cold is
brutal.
just
That kills me.
we had our white Christmas and then we're done with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like it through a little bit into January, and then after that, like I don't want blizzards
No,
happening anymore.
or yeah, no,
Yeah.
anything under freezing, I'm good at that
Hmm.
point. That's weird weather we're having right now, though. It's
It
like
is really weird
sunny, but
weather.
it's raining pretty good right now. Oh well. Anyways, I might need your help because I was
Okay.
planning on this being like a solo episode where I just monologue about something. Um, and I wanted to I'm reading a new book for when listening. It's called False Alarm, and it goes on longer. It has to do with climate change. But the author his name is Bjorn Lomborg, I believe. I'll put the cover up as I do the whole visual thing again. Um, I'm only like a couple chapters through, but the intro is very interesting in that he was saying he kind of laid the foundation, kind of set the scene of like how we think and react and really sort of conceptualize climate change today. And in the whole premise of the book is he acknowledges that climate change is real, that humans do impact the warming of the earth, but our understanding of it today is not realistic. It's not based on facts. It's based on a very extremist sort, not maybe not extremist. That sounds a little politically. It's based on a very unrealistic, sort of catastrophic theory or model that's just not realistic and it does not represent how the earth has warmed
Hmm.
you know in the past, and essentially he breaks it down in saying that the way the Paris Agreement is set up is no different than if somebody or if the government tried to figure out how to prevent all car accidents. And they said the logical solution is simply to lower the speed limit universally to 3 miles an hour. And he said, while that, would be great, you wouldn't have any more accidents. No one's going to be able to get to work on time. It's not the right way to go about it. Instead, we've settled on, maybe 55 to 80, somewhere in the middle there typically is where we've settled as a nation, realizing that you have to give up, some sense of safety, if you will, to be able to, go about your day efficiently. The way the climate, agreements are set up is that it's based on a very unrealistic target to prevent increases year over year in the temperature that just could not be met without extreme and serious sort of interventions that are very, very expensive, that have never been done before. And you're also counting on a group of people who have not done a great job at implementing anything efficiently or appropriately in the past. And we're seeing it's just not playing out. Even with the agreement, they're not going about it the right way, anyways. But essentially, he was trying to paint the picture in the intro that because this sort of narrative about climate change is based so extreme and so unrealistic, and that it says, by 2030, if we don't prevent the earth from heating by X, we're all going to die from a climate crisis. Like, people are afraid to have kids because of climate change. Students are afraid, they're leaving school to protest, and he paints a picture of this one girl holding a sign at a protest, which I do have, that says, you'll die of old age, I'll die of climate change. And simply, that's just not the fact, he says. And so there's this sort of catastrophizing going on right now around climate change, and it's not healthy and it's not good for the debate for how we're actually going to do anything about it. But it is important to recognize that it's real. And by going about saying, oh, it's fine to sort of embellish this because it's for a good cause, isn't how isn't the right thing to do. And I thought that was a little profound, because there's a lot of that goes on in this space that I'm sort of
Mm-hmm.
in, with rights, especially when it comes to guns. And every gun law, and every law for the most part, has been perceived to be a infringement on natural rights. And it's one more step towards communism, we're going to become Canada or something, like
Mm-hmm.
all this stuff. And I do believe that it is important to talk about government, especially bad government actions, in a negative light, in a truthful light. But myself included, there is a lot of embellishment and catastrophizing that goes on in this space. And so, obviously, this branches out with different books, as I try to draw examples and definitions from. I struggled to really sort of bring it together in something constructive at the end,
Mm-hmm.
where I was like, it's important, yes, to talk about this stuff factually, as hard as it may be, as negative as it may be, but how do you prevent yourself from just getting carried away and just holding this sort of, yeah, catastrophizing mindset about it? And actually, I do have the definition for catastrophization, because it's a big word, but very simply, and there's another book in my top 5, Coddling of the American
Mm-hmm.
Mind. They go through, what's going on, mostly in education, when the whole cancel culture thing was firing up and there's a lot of protests and everything at, college campuses. They use catastrophization, which is it's a cognitive distortion, which is simply the tendency to assume the worst case scenario is the most likely scenario, or thinking a situation is worse than it really is. It's also called catastrophic thinking. Um, and so an example of this would be like, words are going to cause emotional or psychological damage, which will lead to physical damage. So we come to the conclusion that words are hurtful, and so that microaggressions, um, you know, even speaking facts that may be true but maybe don't sound great now, are hurtful. Like, that's how we've gotten to that point,
Mm-hmm.
essentially, just to assume that words are actually going to cause somebody to like hurt themselves. Like, and that's an unrealistic sort of assumption. Um, and I did make a note. I do have to bash, Google and Facebook and YouTube, that for banning and striking certain content as like harmful, which is absurd to think about, because if you're viewing media through a 2 inch by 2 inch
Mm-hmm.
square, it's not harmful. Like, that's to even call it that, I think, is extremely irresponsible. But maybe I'm catastrophizing by saying that.
What are you referring to more specifically there? Like what?
So, for example, in if you post anything to do with weapons,
Mm-hmm.
or even the humidors, for example,
Mm-hmm.
violating that content, they'll say, oh, it violates our weapons policy, our tobacco policy, and it's all in the name of removing harmful content, or they only want safe
Mm-hmm.
content, like inferring that this stuff is not safe to view. And I don't think that's the right sort of mindset to.
Okay.
And you honestly just say, we're trying to keep it like as vanilla, and as well, I say vanilla, but you can just throw your ass up there anyways and it's fine.
It's almost like
um
non-violence. I mean, I know that just by having these things isn't necessarily you being violent, but
but then you
it's
can you
almost
can
like
see
non-violence.
people throw up news stories of
Yeah.
people, and it's so, like, it's really picky and choosy. But honestly, I'd much rather them just say, yeah, it's not, well, don't say it's not for safety, but just say, it's because we only care about our advertisers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're trying to keep it as, within, the Overton window of the advertisers, basically. Just call it that. Don't lie it's about safety or anything, because, like, now it infers there's an unsafe side to it, when
Mm-hmm.
really you're viewing something through a tiny little square. If that does hurt you, then okay, you shouldn't be on it anyways. And that's a whole nother debate, because I do think it's not good for anybody. It's kind of a necessary evil for us in this space. And I acknowledge that I really don't like it. I'm not even good at posting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, and again, you can see how I had problems sort of bringing this topic to like a funnel, like a logical conclusion, and tie it all together because you can just go so
Yeah.
many places with it, and the news obviously doesn't help with that. The news is completely built off of catastrophizing,
Mhm.
you know,
Oh,
and
yeah.
because if
We talked
everything's going
about
to
that
end, I
the
got to
last
stay
time
informed. Yeah,
too. Like everything is just fear mongering and
yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, and
No.
so and sorry, I didn't
No,
mean
no,
to
no,
cut
you're
you off,
good, you're
but
good.
the title I sort of had, like catastrophization or catastrophizing rather, and then I had black flag with the does not equal sign, black pill. So black flag is sort of the whole like anarchy sort of movement. That's sort of that. And I've gone over the definition of anarchy. It's not, it's not what you see. It's not Antifa. We do not like Antifa. We don't own them. They're idiots. But essentially, it's just living peacefully, not messing with anybody, not being messed with. That's all I want. I recognize everyone's natural rights and my rights. Don't fuck with me. I don't fuck with you. That's it. But peaceful is like one of the main descriptors of it. Um, Black pill, on the other hand, is sort of like the mindset that like almost like nihilistic,
Mhm.
that
Okay.
everything's gonna suck, the worst is gonna happen. It is sort of like a catastrophizing mindset. And in the political, spectrum and in the realm we see today, a lot of people who are black pilled just say everything's just fucked. Like we can't save it. It's beyond saving. There's nothing we can do. White pill is sort of the opposite. It is the opposite, not sort of. It is the opposite of that, where people are hopeful. People are willing to work through the proper channels, or the existing channels rather, within the rules of today, to try to make a difference because they do believe that there is a way to, make things better, and sort of fighting the good fight, if you will. And for a while, when I first started reading a lot of the anarchist essays, and works of like Jefferson and a lot of the people who wrote the Constitution, I became I very quickly dove into like the black pill mindset of like, well, holy shit, if the Constitution was there, if the system of government was set up, how do we end up here where we are today? I think my thought was like the Constitution and the system of government we have only sort of the only logical conclusion was for it to get to this point. And so fighting within the rules of the system make no sense because they can just do whatever they want anyways. And so I became very black pill very quickly. And so I realized though, as I read Colony of the American Mind and other books and listened to other people, and I want to play part of a podcast here because I think it sort of summarizes it very well. I realized that I don't want to feel that way
Mhm.
because there's sort of a helplessness to that. And yes, you can buy guns, you can buy kit, you can buy gear, ammo, whatever it is, and you can train with that, but still, you're not doing anything. You're sort of sitting around waiting for the worst to happen. I don't like that. I don't want to live my life like that.
Mhm.
And so I've slowly started shifting maybe to like a gray pill sort of area, if you will, because I think there is something sort of I don't want to say like this provides purpose because it sounds sort of well. I think the parable of Sisyphus. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Mm.
So it's the in the Stoic sort of circles. It's almost memed. It's used so much, but essentially Sisyphus was cursed or damned or whatever it was. He was sentenced to roll a giant boulder up a hill, and whenever he reached the top of the hill, the boulder would just fall back down. He had to do it again. That was his life. That was his entire existence, which sounds pretty miserable. That sounds like a terrible way to live. But the way the Stoic looks at it is that he was able to be happy in this and still laugh, in the face of the gods who sentenced him to this life because he found purpose in this
Mhm.
and he was happy and he was content with this way of life. And so whenever you are facing something that seems to be, sort of shitty or sort of tough, you sort of invoke that parable of like, okay, you just got to roll the rock. And actually, there's a
Mhm.
whole, I got to find the meme. There's a meme and it's so relevant to me. It was like I'll show you the pictures of it, but it looks like the old sort of like ancient like Roman or Greek paintings of the guy pushing the rock up the hill. Uh, and in the rock, it just said the fucking dishes and the fucking laundry.
Oh my
And
god.
I hate folding laundry. I was like, I need
Same.
that somewhere in my room. That's so funny. And I sort of look at that as maybe like that today is how we should look at in this space, going about trying to create change through the proper or the
Mhm.
established channels today, because my view was anyone involved in government is only involved to benefit, for their own profit. And if you try to, go your own way, you're just going to get steamrolled by everyone who's not interested in anything but themselves, or you end up like, constantly people who've been assassinated or just removed or sidelined. And so I was like, if it was important, they're not going to let you do it. So there's really no point. Don't trust anyone in government. Don't vote. Don't do all of that. And then I realized very quickly, like, that's stupid because if I think that and I just sit here and I acquire gear and I
Mhm.
train and I talk shit and I will admit a lot of the things I've said have been not very constructive or not very, helpful or positive. Um, you just sit there and you kind of hope for the worst to happen
Yeah.
and you're not doing anything, you're not actively doing things. So I can still do all of that I like to do because I do think it is important to be proficient in, weapons and staying fit and staying healthy and sort of, keeping the lifestyle you want. But also I do think there is a responsibility to make a change in the established channels as well. And there's a lot of people who I follow, and the podcast I'm going to play for you, like you later, they're going about doing that. And for a while, I kind of sat back. I'm like, well, that's stupid. You're just wasting your time.
Mhm.
Or maybe you're just doing it for clout and for attention. And maybe it is, but at the end of the day, I do think someone's doing it. And they're doing it for the right reasons, as far as I can tell. And so I think that's something to admire. That should be something we strive for. And the last thing I'll say before I shut up on this is there are several quotes, and I'll try to find them here when I pause for a second, where the Stoics say that like there's almost a duty, and there's a chapter in the book I was reading about just like living virtuously. There's a duty to like public service almost,
Mhm.
and that I feel like resonated a lot with sort of this to be like to live just for yourself in your shell. And I've talked about community, but just to live for yourself and not really move outwards and help your fellow man, that's not the right way to live either.
Mhm.
And so I'm sort of coming around now to being less doom and gloom about it, to be like there are things we can do and there are things that we should do. And so sitting at home catastrophizing is not a healthy way to live. But I'll shut up as I look for these quotes now.
No, I feel like you have, well, yeah, I don't think you're too, like, all of that came together well. So I get where you were trying to go with relating all of that together. I feel like you almost have two separate topics there. Like, you have the catastrophizing and all of that. And then when you started touching on the social media side
Hmm.
and the censorship, I think those could almost be two separate things.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I
think
just,
and
I don't know if this is funny.
comes
I just
down
completely
to,
lost my
and
train of thought.
I wrote, yeah, no, I'm sorry. I just rambled for so long. As I was sort of putting all my thoughts down on paper for the episode, and I don't know if I got it from a book, but I kind of just came up with the waterfall of questions in my head where if, let's say I get a notification from Telegram saying, they're passing this bill, red flag laws are now a thing in familiar. Are you familiar with red flag
Mm-mm.
laws? So essentially what a red flag law
So you're
is,
gonna have to redact that.
you're right. Thank you. Essentially, what a red flag law is that it allows somebody to anonymously file a claim about somebody or call in or report somebody as being like mentally unstable or something or other. And for whatever reason they want to say, the government then come in and take away all the citizens' firearms and prevent them from ever owning firearms again. So there's a lot of issues with this, obviously, because it could be an ex that you did not
Yeah.
end things well. It could just be somebody who doesn't like what you say.
Mhm.
And depending on who the judge is, who's pressing charges, who's got their finger on the button, like you're likely just going to lose, everything for an unjust reason. So red flag laws are a big fuck you that everyone in the space really is not happy for, but a lot of states are starting to push them now. And so this is
Mhm.
where a lot of this debate about getting active in sort of the arena, if you will, of public affairs or in politics is sort of coming into question now because the only people left in politics are, again, the only people who are going to do things for themselves. And if they perceive red flag laws to be a win for them to keep them in office, they're going to push them. And so now we're seeing people on the outside, like in this group, who've been like, fuck it, sort of starting to step up and go, okay, someone should fight. And so there's some good groups out there like Firearms Policy Coalition. They're really good guys. They're fighting that brace ruling, which I kind
Mhm.
of broke down, which now is like an injunction, which is a big deal.
Mhm.
So, but anyways, the Stoic quotes. The first one is from Cicero. He says, "Since we see that man is designed by nature to safeguard and protect his fellows, it follows from this natural disposition that the wise man should desire to engage in politics and government, and also to live in accordance with nature by taking to himself a wife and desiring to have children for her. even the passion of love, when pure, is not thought incompatible with the character of the Stoic sage. So again, maybe my thought about having children should be reevaluated, but I'm not now, not now. And then Seneca, who's my favorite of the Stoics, says, "It is, of course, required of a man that he should benefit his fellow men, many if he can, if not a few. If not a few, those who are nearest, if not there, himself. For when he renders himself useful to others, he engages in public affairs." So I think that's something that, a lot of people in the Stoic sort of square don't push a lot to a lot of us in the Stoicism, the freedom movement, fitness, it all sort of
Hmm.
interlaps or overlaps in certain cases. And I think that should be a almost like a wedge to push, like getting involved in the public square a little more, a little more.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people just lost hope in it. And, so I don't even know if that's the right
It's
thing to do, but the more I'm reading, the more I'm listening, it feels like the right thing to do, and that we shouldn't just give up and sort of retreat to ourselves, to our own circles, and like hope for civil war, hope for
Well,
an
what,
apocalypse
yeah,
or stuff
what's
like
the
that. Yeah.
benefit in that to you? And then to the people around you, you're not an enjoyable person
No,
to be around. Like,
no,
and not even like take it out of this space, but like I'm sure in daily life, we all know someone who just is always complaining or like
I
they
had
always
that
have
exactly.
a gripe about something. And like on a smaller scale, that's the exact same thing. Like that's a
Yeah,
catastrophe mindset just in daily life. And it's so frustrating being around a person like that. And what do you get out of it? Like,
exactly.
okay, this thing's bothering you today, like do something about it.
Yeah,
Or like you're always complaining about this one thing, do something about it, you know? So going back to then these bigger ideas, it's like, what does retreating and not doing anything, what does that do for you? And then you're almost becoming hypocritical, right? Because you're a
yeah,
person who you're all talk and you have all these things, and not you,
yeah,
obviously you being general, but like you have all these things and like you stand for all these messages, but you don't do anything about it.
yeah.
And you also mentioned that waterfall of
Which I
questions.
didn't say after I mentioned it.
Oh,
I
okay,
have
yeah.
ADHD all over the place. I'm pulling everything from my notes that I remember writing down
Yeah,
about this.
go through those.
But essentially, what I was trying to do because I do acknowledge and I get the climate sort of activist thought that it's fine to embellish this stuff, it's fine to even lie about this stuff because the cause is just, it's the right thing to do. And in our space, even I can argue it's more important because we're dealing with individual, like natural, God given, whatever your beliefs are, rights that, everyone born as a human is like, you're given that nobody can touch, nobody can take away, nobody can, do anything about other than yourself. And so, because that's routed more in virtue than, the actual thought of climate change, how we perceive it, in how we perceive it, my thought was like, this is just more important. So we're fine to do that. And I did partake in that, but it's not great. And I'm going to get to the waterfall, I swear here. I know I mentioned it, that I went completely around it. I'm getting to that. The problem with that, though, is like climate change now, you have people who are either vehemently believers of it, whether it be actual believers or just in the cause, so they don't care about lying, or people who, and it's politicized, people who just completely deny it because they either know it's bullshit, they know like the actual messaging is crap, or because it's politicized, they pick the side. They don't really should care to look into it. They say, no, they're full of shit. I'm not going to look into it either. So nothing really gets done effectively. And the stuff that is getting done is horseshit. But the reason why catastrophizing isn't great is yes, because of that, it becomes polarizing and inherently political. But catastrophizing also has a strange way of manifesting either the exact outcome you're afraid of or suffering almost on par with that. And so I do bring it back to a climate change example, but a non climate change example would be the person who is constantly, afraid of like, they're constantly like paranoid about their health. Every
Hmm.
time they go in to see the doctor, they are terrified of getting diagnosed with some terrible disease, some incurable, thing. And so that person may be afraid of going to the doctor at all in fear of getting that diagnosis,
Hmm.
or that person may have just given up hope because they figured this crazy disease is going to end up taking me no matter what. And so they may not, invoke healthy lifestyle choices. Either way, you're not going to have a healthy outcome with that mindset. So you may not get that exact disease, but you're going to end up inflicting harm upon yourself for that mindset that you could have prevented otherwise if you didn't let that thought sort of spiral out of control. Same with climate change right now. What we're seeing is that because we have this warped perception of what it is and what we have to do to prevent it, we're using interventions such as solar panels, wind turbines, electric cars that are innovations of yesterday. What has to be done to really meet, and nothing can meet the goal that we have in the Paris Agreement, but to really make an impactful change would be to focus on different innovations, different fuels and whatnot, and really put more money into that instead of forcing these physical sort of, things that we have today because they look good when all they do is create more suffering for especially the developing world and poorer countries. That money, those resources would have saved more lives and created better outcomes in life if they were focused more so on education and infrastructure and health. And so we end up creating more suffering through our sort of catastrophe mindset with climate change. So so that's why that's bad. That's why catastrophizing is bad. The politicization of it, how divisive it becomes, and then the actual manifestation of the outcome or suffering on par with the outcome, and how to sort of prevent that or how to differentiate catastrophizing and thinking about something awful and talking about it in like an objective light or a more deliberate way, I think, is this waterfall of questions that sort of came up. And there I've heard it or similar questions used when thinking about other topics, but essentially in my mind, it made sense that whenever I feel fired up about something and I start going down the rabbit hole of fuck this, we're going to Canada, I go like, okay, why do I feel this way? And that's a very easy question. I don't like this bill or whatever it was.
Mhm.
Like I think it's a shitty bill. And the next question, am I entitled to feel upset? Like, does this actually impact me? And so let's say it was a bill that passed like only in like another state. Okay, so no, it doesn't. But at the same time, it might set the precedent for other bills in other
Mhm.
states. So doesn't really impact me, but it might. So immediately right off the bat, this is becoming a less relevant issue at the moment. And the last question, this is probably the most important one out of the waterfall of questions, is do I want to feel this way?
Mhm.
And most of the time, the answer is going to be no. I'm not going to want to feel pissed off or just hopeless about something because that's not a good way to waste my time. An
Mhm.
entire pillar of, this channel and the way I live my life is like, you know, I'm gonna die. So like I don't want to waste my time feeling like this or doing, or living in this. So I'm probably more likely after asking myself those questions, gonna find a way to either do something about it or disregard it and, do something else. And so I think that's something that needs to be asked more so when people are confronted with an issue or a thought that sort of starts putting them on the train of, oh, we're fucked.
Mhm.
So
Whenever I start to spiral or get freaked out about something, and I can't stop
yeah.
thinking about it, and I'm like, there's no way for this to end positively. I'll ask myself, what is the worst that can happen? Like, what are you so afraid of? What is the absolute worst case scenario that can come out of this? And then let yourself sit in that, like really go through it and be like, okay, this is the absolute worst that could come out of this. And you're going to realize that's something that will never happen.
No.
It's so outlandish. It will never, probably never happen.
Right.
And then on the flip side, you can be like, okay, what if I do this or what if this happens? What's the absolute best scenario that comes out of this? And then you can kind of sit in it in that side, right? And then you're going to get to a place where you realize it's going to be something in the middle and it's not going to be that bad. But you have to be able to, I think, be able to confront that side of like, what is the worst that's going to happen? And if that happens, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to respond? How will I like move on from it? Because yeah, you can't just naively be like, well, everything's gonna be okay and like perfect on the other side of the catastrophizing mindset. Like you need to be realistic about things,
Right.
but being able to really force yourself to look at both of those, at least for me, that helps me then come to middle ground and be like, it's really going to be fine. Like it's not going to be that bad. And here's my role in it as well, because everything isn't like the universe is out to get me, right? Like I have responsibility in these situations too. And it always just helps me like pull back and be like, okay, this is my role or my responsibility in this. And if I, do what I need to do, it's really not going to be that bad.
Right. And do what you can do. So like, do
Mhm.
you like if you are really worried about this stuff, if like especially when talking about laws and freedoms and stuff, and sort of like the gun, the freedom space here, you know, do you have like equipment that you are proficient in, that you're trained in? Cool, great. But again, you shouldn't exist for that moment where you're going to have to use it. And there was a
Mhm.
great quote from another podcast I listened to. It's called the Redacted Culture Cast. Um, the individual was talking to another guest, and he was saying, if you do like conceal carry a pistol every day, your hope should not be for you should not carry it, with the hope that you're going to have to use that thing,
Mhm.
or your whole life and your personality should not be based around training for the scenario in which you're going to have to use that thing. Yes, because you carry it, it is your duty to be proficient and responsible with it, but you should not exist for that moment.
Mhm.
And I think that's important to keep in mind with this too, is that we're not here to be, we shouldn't want some terrible thing to
Mhm.
happen because we think that's going to fix all the problems. Like, there's an inconceivable amount of suffering that's going to come from that. We should do whatever we can today, personally, in our own homes, but also in the public square, to prevent that from happening, or to
Mhm.
prepare ourselves best for that to happen. And so, because that's not a binary thing where it's everything sucks, everything's great,
Mhm.
people, and we know people like to take those shortcuts and not really live in that sort of gray, that uncomfortable human problem area. We see a lot of the either you're in the public square or you're vehemently against it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of society is just kind of done with politics today. And again, we saw that with the Bud Light backlash. We
Mhm.
saw with a lot of the boycotting. Like, people just don't want it. People are sick of it. And so I fear that if people completely turn their backs to it, we get a lot of what we're happening now, which is like, oh, the government's saying aliens are real, and no one gives a
No one
shit because no one
cares.
fucking cares about this anymore.
Yeah.
But if you completely turn a blind eye, it's just not going to be good either. And so
Mhm.
it's a balance. It's always going to be that gray, uncomfortable. We're raining
That came
now.
out of
Yeah,
nowhere.
we're really raining now. Ripped my patio furniture.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like we
Yeah,
talked a
it's
lot about this. I don't want to like complete just like ramble on and on like I kind of have been, but
well, I think you have a good focus for it. Like it's clear what message you're trying to get out there. It's hard also to it depends so much on the person,
it
right? And like
does.
their willingness to be open-minded because this conversation could go very differently if you were having it with someone else or
Oh
like
yeah.
if I was having it with someone else. Like it and that's the part that you also can't control. And that's the other thing I was going to say too is like, yeah, you have to take responsibility for what you can take responsibility for, but
You
some of
can't
it is
control
just
other
out of
people.
your
Yeah,
control and you can't let that dictate your life. And also that whole like waiting for something to
mm,
happen, right? Or like the doomsday stuff. Like or the example that you gave about like anytime you go out, like you're waiting for a scenario where you're going to have to use that, like you will miss so much of your life if you're
yeah,
always waiting for this like big catastrophe that's going to happen because then that's all you're thinking about, that's all you're doing,
exactly.
and your life will happen whether you're present in it or not. But yeah, and that's the stuff that you can control, and then the stuff that you can't. And not saying just like turn a blind eye and be like, well, you can't control it, but like you have to do what you can do to an extent, and then you also have a right to live your own life. And it doesn't make you a bad person for not trying to fix everything. And
No, and there's so many things I can draw to that, but you're absolutely right. It
mhm,
really, you don't want to feel that way.
yeah,
Like, there's so much to enjoy in life and to do in life that that's not what you should be spending your time on.
hmm
Yeah. But anyways, I'll have to find a way to put this in. Actually, I might be able to do this. Um, I can cut all this when I'm going back. I probably play it with the laptop. Actually, no, because my sound's going through my
oh
headphones.
yeah, it sounds coming through here.
I'll have to play it through my phone, and
Hmm
then I'll just download it and add it to this. But anyways, it's from a podcast. So company that's been in the game for a while, T-Rex Arms, really popular YouTube channel. They more so recently, they've been in the gear space for a while. Been putting out a lot of like gear for people. They still make great videos though, and they've really recently have gotten active in the legislative sort of like space, and have been talking to people, meeting with people, going on the news, sort of doing the tour that a lot of people I've mentioned have turned their backs to, that they just don't have faith in anymore. It's useless.
hmm
Why are we doing it? But in this, he talks about in the state that they're in, that they're about to now, it's Tennessee. So they had that school shooting,
Mhm.
obviously, and now red flag laws are being put on the table to prevent this sort of thing. And he talks about why it's not the right way to go about doing it, why other things should be done. But also, some people have sent in questions about like, why are you wasting your time? Sort of along those lines. But I'll just play it. It's
Mhm.
really good because I heard it yesterday at work as I was starting to like formulate my thoughts around this episode, and I was like, that's oddly relevant. It's only like a minute 30.
Someone points out this is a very difficult thing to fight against. As you said, it is a very personal tragedy to Bill Lee, as well as the lawmakers being threatened. The tyranny of democracy may make lawmakers bend to something that is objectively wrong because the mob demands and threatens it. Yes, this is a problem with democracy, to be sure, but it's also a problem with any type of representative government. Even though these people represent us, they will hear from the mob if the mob shows up with the torches and the pitchforks. So we really have to make sure that we pick men who are principled, not men who are pragmatic, when we pick people to represent us. So I see lots of comments here in the thread, people saying you can't vote your way out of this, you can't fix this by voting. True, you cannot fix this sort of problem by voting. But one of the things that you do have to do is you have to raise up men from inside of your community who are actually principled men, and then you need to appoint them, and then you need to vote for them. You have to do many things. Quick rabbit trail. This is a common thread all over the internet. You can never comply your way out of tyranny in the same way that you can never spend your way out of debt. And if you do only one thing, you are not going to be able to get yourself out of anything. You cannot vote yourself out of political difficulty. You cannot build yourself out of political difficulty. But if you do vote and build and raise up people in your community and educate your own children and take all of your responsibilities very seriously, that is how you get out of stuff. You have to do all of the things that you are required to do, not just one of them. And then you can't just complain that if you only did one of them, it would not be sufficient. That is obvious. You have to do all the things. You can't just vote yourself out of trouble, but if you live in a constitutional republic with representative government, voting is one of your responsibilities, and possibly serving is one of your responsibilities as well, just like all of the other responsibilities that you have.
So like that was pretty spot on for the
Mhm.
topic I was thinking of, and I was like, voting is sort of the voting or participating in politics is sort of seen as like a silver bullet in the sense where it's looked at in a vacuum as like the one thing we can do because it's the thing that most of us do most often. We vote,
Mhm.
and that's really our only interaction with it. But like, do we go to our local like town hall meetings, and does that impact the statewide or nationwide? No, but it might impact your immediate, sort of the outcomes in your immediate community. Like the parking meters here, for example. I don't know how many people show up to the town
Mhm.
hall meeting here to like shoot those down, but now that they suck, everyone's like
Everyone's
trying to get rid of them.
upset.
And are they going to get rid of them now? There's such a financial incentive not to that
Mhm.
they're likely not going to get rid of them. And so that's, I think, a great example locally as to why it's important for somebody to stay involved,
Mhm.
to stay watchful, and to stay virtuous in their sort of participation in it. And I think he did a great job of summarizing that it's not that one thing. There are many things that we can do and we should be doing to, participate in this. At the same time, he didn't really touch on this. I think that helps put these people, this group, in a more positive light instead of just this one bucket of extremists with all their guns,
Mhm.
the right wingers, the crazy, Trumpsters with their guns, they all kind of get tucked in the way in this one corner of, Republican, conservative, and a lot of them are, many of them are, most of them are, but most of them are people who really just don't want to be messed with. And they don't want to mess with you, and they're good people. And so I think by putting them in front of people, the right people, putting the right people in a position to be in front of people, rather, is the way to sort of, I guess, show. But again, there's so many other moving parts. But
Mhm.
what I'm trying to say is, I think that he nailed it on the head. That you have to do all of the things and do them virtuously, and that's really the way to go about it.
Mhm.
But I still really feel like I didn't tie the whole catastrophizing thing together, but I feel like that
Yeah,
sort
I
of
think you did.
was a vague sort of direction I was trying to go with it, and why it's important not to do that, and why it's important. It's important because you miss the things you should be doing,
Yeah.
like taking part in voting and taking part in
And there
government
are
and whatnot.
things that
And
you can do. There are smaller
yeah,
scale things. It doesn't have to be all or nothing and then I'm gonna retreat, or I'm, all out and I'm there with
Right.
pitchforks. And,
Yeah.
there are smaller scale things that you can do. And also there are so many other things going on in our lives. Like you can't do everything,
No.
right? So you kind of almost have to pick and choose like what things can I reasonably do
Yep.
and actually try to make a difference in, and you just incorporate those as best as you can, and it doesn't
Right.
have to be all or nothing. And sometimes people say like, well, then you're not really doing anything because you're just trying to like dabble in these little
Exactly.
things here and there, and like
Yeah.
it's not really like adding up and making a difference. Well, what does not doing anything have to do with it?
Nothing.
And also, like, to be an extremist on either side, what does that really get you? Like,
We've seen it. Nothing.
yeah, we've
Yeah.
seen it does absolutely nothing. I wish I could think of where it's at. I've seen an illustration where it's basically like the two extremists on either
Hmm.
side, and then it's kind of that middle spectrum of both of the. And I would argue that's where we fall because I
Yeah.
feel like you're kind of middle on the. Correct me if you don't agree with this, but like I feel like you're more middle ground, maybe on the right. Like you have
Sure.
some more conservative leanings, but you're still very open minded and like willing to have conversations. And I would say I'm more middle ground on the left, but at the same time, like I'm always down to like hear
Right.
someone's opinion, and like and those two groups then have more of a similar goal. I'll try and find this
Hmm.
illustration and send it to you, but it does a really nice job mapping out like how those two regions, but those are the ones typically doing like those smaller, okay, what can I do, more manageable things, rather than your end caps, which is like, I'm going to do nothing at all. Maybe I don't have an opinion or a leaning whatsoever, so I'm not going to do anything. And then the ones who are like, well, I'm not going to do anything because everything's fucked.
Yeah.
Like those
Yep.
two, neither one of those is going to get you a beneficial outcome. And also, just as a quality to have as a human being, like it's not an attractive
No.
quality if you are just complaining about stuff but not willing to do anything about it or to attempt to make the situation that you're in any better.
Right.
I don't think it makes you like a higher order person
Definitely
because you're
not.
now like, well, I'm there, can't do anything about this, so I'm just gonna back off. Like that to me is a sign of I would honestly say like a weak minded
Yeah.
person.
Agreed. I'd absolutely agree with that.
But yeah, I'll try and find that
But no,
illustration because it
people are usually most of the I didn't mean
mm-hmm,
to cut you off,
mm-hmm,
sorry.
you're good.
The majority of people do end up in a more dialed down version of whatever political
Mm-hmm,
party that you see personified in your representatives or on the news than what they like identify with. So if like someone says like, "Oh, I'm Republican, I'm conservative,"
mm-hmm,
typically they're not going to be or hold all the same views as what you'd think the stereotypical person
mm-hmm,
who identifies with that. And so a lot of that has to do with our representatives, how they present themselves, what they sort of mandate and what they ask everyone to do from their side, and how the news sort of blows everything up as
mm-hmm,
well. And then people take to the internet to sort of hate on the other side. And so people may come across as, the extreme caricature of whatever party that they identify with, but typically they end up more in the middle than everything. And for the most part, people don't want to mess with other people, don't want to fuck with other
mm-hmm,
people. They also don't want to be fucked with though. And so I'm not trying to say everyone's got a little anarchist in them, but that's sort of the premise. Like for the
mm-hmm,
most part, nobody wants to fuck with somebody else. And I think when the question of guns comes into play, especially with red flag laws, like
mm-hmm,
that podcast was going over, people aren't doing that out of like hatred for the other side necessarily. For the most part, they're
mm-hmm,
people who are of the impression, because it's all they hear, it's all they know, that this is going to keep them safe. And so they're not doing it to specifically fuck with another group. It's just a very uninformed, and it's a dangerous
mm-hmm,
opinion for us and for everyone involved, really, because it's only going to make things more dangerous. But it's people when they lash back at that,
mm-hmm.
it's you are coming after me. It's not like it's not from a hey, let's talk about this in a more like higher thought sort of space. I know you're not coming after me with this specifically, and despite sometimes the government, sometimes the
Mm-hmm.
representatives do specifically do that. For the most part, individuals who call for red flag laws, as long as they're not extremists in their political like spectrum, they're doing it because they truly do believe that it is the safest thing possible. But it's quite the opposite. And so the debate again turns into the whole shortcut, red versus blue, binary ones
Yeah.
and zeros, fuck you, fuck
And I
you,
think
fuck
we've
you.
talked
And
about this
then
before.
yeah,
Like, I hate the two party system. And like,
most people do, I think. Now I think most people are
yeah.
sick of it.
And I don't think that it's so black and white where it's like you are on the left or you
Yeah,
are on the right. Like,
it's not. It rarely is.
yeah, I wouldn't even I would never tell someone like my leanings, not because I'm
That's
like
not
afraid
what
of
I'm
the reaction,
interested in.
but
Yeah.
I also just it's not that black and white. Like
No.
I always say that like yeah, I probably if someone talks to me like I do lean more towards the left because I'm very much like I don't think that I'm going to use the Bud Light
Yeah.
example from earlier, right? Like I would like to see us get to a point where that's not seen as an agenda, like
Yeah.
where it's just that is a human being who is put in an ad and that's it. Like end of the day, it doesn't need to be
Yep.
that big of a deal. And I'm aware of like what type of mindset that typically is more associated with. But at the same time, like I don't know. I just hate that idea of like you have to be one thing or the other. You
Yeah.
can't have ideas that go both ways because I don't think that that's realistic to how most people think. And it's frustrating on either side then because I think you typically can get put into those extremes by other people.
Yep.
And it's so frustrating because then you're like, okay, well, I said I have this one opinion. That doesn't mean that I'm, XYZ on the end extremes.
And
And then it becomes a thing of like, well, now what am I even battling here? Like I'm battling an opinion that you have of me that's not even true. And then what are we doing for this cause that we're
yep.
talking about, So I just hate the way that we kind of put people as like you are this or you are that and it can't be anything else. Like
Mhm.
you can't have opinions on both sides because you're never going to make progress
Right.
towards anything.
And a lot of that, and I may be funneling back towards a catastrophizing mindset here. A lot of it comes back to, the way government media is set up.
Hmm.
It's the way to perpetuate votes and views and everything is to create the most extreme, most crazy, outlandish sort of caricature of the other side. And so I don't think Bud Light would even have done what they did if there wasn't already an agenda that being focused on about that
Hmm.
today. And people wouldn't have such a huge like headbutting with this thing if the government wasn't involved in the beginning, like with this coming in saying, and there are restrictions here regarding, gay rights, even the
Hmm.
fact that there are like gay rights, like that shouldn't have been a thing. And a lot of that came with government involvement to begin with. And I feel like if you just let people hands off figure themselves out, like everyone's going to go with, what's best, I think, with completely no intervention, no hand above. People are going to realize that, like, that's not important. Like natural rights are natural rights, and like do whatever you want. That sort of, and I don't know. I think a lot of my everything that sort of we fight over today in like the social or the political sphere, I find has stemmed from government, involvement and like initially messing it up, and then coming and saying we saved the day. Now we're going to push all this stuff on you now, and it just inflames people because initially I think everyone was like pretty good for the most part, and now it's a sudden problem for votes and an agenda thing, and it's like keep out of it. I think people will figure it out. But the second you get involved, it immediately becomes an us versus them thing, just due to the nature of
Hmm.
your own existence and getting votes, and it just becomes another fight again. When it didn't have to be a fight. So that's just me though.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And I almost feel like people have to go through those extremes to eventually be able to come back and find
Yeah,
some middle ground. Like I feel like that's been my experience just speaking personally because I definitely grew up in a place that's
sure.
heavy, I mean, Republican. Like it's what you think of when you think of actually, no, I'm gonna backtrack that a
Yeah,
little bit. I don't think where I'm from is necessarily like the small town America. I think the places around me are. And so I see we had a lot of that growing up. Like it
yeah,
was a very, Republican, more forward mindset. And then I think where I was actually at more in the center was a bit more, I would say just open minded. Like I wouldn't
sure.
even really put it on either fence. But so growing up that way and then, getting a little older and being like, there's a lot of stuff here that I don't agree with. And more so on the side of the human rights type of things.
Yeah.
And it also really comes down to the person and like what you're exposed to and the type of people that
Hmm.
you have in your life because there are people in my life who I could never vote against their way of living.
Sure.
You know what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah.
And so then I think I went to the other extreme and I was like, well, I have these people in my life that I
And
care about so much. And like,
fight for them.
yeah, I
Yeah,
want to fight
yeah.
for them. Like, I don't agree with these things that are being held against them.
Hmm.
And that's not productive and healthy either. And so
Yeah.
but I feel like you have to kind of go through both extremes, and now I can be a bit more
Yeah,
in the middle ground, and I'm still extremely opinionated about a lot
for
of stuff.
sure.
So it's not like middle ground in the sense of like, oh, I don't really have an opinion on this or that, but it's just more so being, I don't know, being able to recognize that like
Yeah.
you don't need to live on the two ends.
No, and
Yeah.
similarly, I grew up in obviously very conservative,
Mhm.
area in this state. Went to private Catholic
Mhm.
schools, for grade school, for high school, and I did identify, with the strong conservative, Republican views just because that's what I grew up in.
Mhm.
And the more I saw, and the less and it wasn't even much of what I saw from that side, um, or it wasn't so much my hate. I don't know really. I can really know how to word it here, but I really started disassociating with it when I realized I just don't like how this makes me feel.
Mhm.
Like it wasn't anything to do with my side or the other side. It was really more so like this just sucks, and only more of the same really comes from this.
Mhm.
And regardless of like what happens, like what I really care about, what I really like, ends up getting made illegal anyways,
Mhm.
regardless of who I support, and they're not really representing me at the end of the day. And so I just completely kind of disassociated with like all of them. And so yeah, some of my beliefs, obviously being big gun guy and just and I unfortunately I think, absolute freedom and natural rights somehow becomes, a right-wing Republican conservative thing. I think they paint themselves as that party to try to get votes from us
Mhm.
because again, that Second Amendment right and just amendments in general tend to align with natural rights. They become sort of the welcoming arms for those people when really they don't give a shit. They'll take
Mhm.
them away in a second if it
Oh,
means they
okay.
can get votes. And I think I saw that and was like, fuck all of you. You're all the same
Mhm.
people. And so that's how I sort of ended up where I am in the middle. But yeah, obviously being a gun guy, being a natural rights guy, it does get associated with that, that right wing conservative thing. Um, but yeah, I see them both as one and the same.
Mhm.
They both act exactly the same. They look a little different, they sound a little different, but they do the exact same thing, just differently.
Yeah.
And so that's why I really don't like either of them.
Yeah, I think my biggest thing on either side of that in general is just I cannot stand ignorance.
Well, no wonder you hate both parties, and they're
I
made
know.
up of the most ignorant people who couldn't even run a lemonade stand.
I know. I think that's just what gets me. And like sometimes I will have to pull back from conversations with
Yeah,
people because it's like you are doing nothing to educate yourself or to, yeah, just to like be aware. And I don't know. I can't
you're just
stand
parroting
ignorance. And yeah,
headlines or what you saw in the
if
news, and
I
that's
can
it,
tell
nothing
that
more.
you literally only get your information from
Twitter
media headlines for Twitter and you just regurgitate a
or X. Sorry,
post
it's X
that,
now. Yeah,
oh, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I don't
excuse
know
me.
what's going on there.
I saw that on my phone the other day and I was like, what the hell is
Yeah,
this? I
fuck did I
literally was like, what did
download?
I download from this drug? Um, yeah, like if that is where you can tell that all of somebody's information is coming from, I really don't want to have a conversation with you, period, because you don't have your own thoughts.
Yep.
And that is a big issue for me. Like you can think whatever you want, but they need to be your thoughts and you need to have educated yourself as to why you think that way. And even if it doesn't agree with what I think, if I can tell that it's your actual thought, I can have more respect for that. Obviously, unless it's like you're intentionally like harming someone. I'm not referring to those
If
cases,
it
but
interferes with natural rights, it's a pretty easy line to draw.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
agreed. Yeah, and again, we all know that that's their only involvement in the
Mhm.
actual, arena, if you will. You just read a headline, maybe you retweeted or replied to
Mhm.
something on social media, and then you think you're an activist or something. Like you don't know half the story. You're just throwing more gas on a fire that was started through ignorance,
Mhm.
and you're making things worse.
This is kind of going back to a topic from earlier, those red flag
Hmm.
laws. Made me start thinking because I feel like we have a notion that as American, well, it depends where you're at, right? Like Northern Americans get a rep for probably being a little bit more harsh for thinking like New York or something like that. And then
Sure.
in the South, everyone's really friendly and,
Hmm.
they look out for each other, or whatever. I think that's the idea of America that is ideal, right? Like it's a
Yeah.
neighborly place, like people look out for each other. This is just my opinion, and I know it's probably not a popular one. I feel like Americans have I don't even know how to say this, almost like a fear of their fellow citizens. And
Oh yeah,
that the red law
oh
stuff is
yeah.
what made me think of that, or the red flags,
Well,
whatever it's called.
we don't say it here, but the Wuhan flu
Oh,
showed that,
yeah.
where people were willing to out other people, like, you didn't wear a mask, and
Yeah.
people were like actively trying to sniff out people
Mhm.
who took the intervention. Like,
Mhm.
whenever in history was it okay to go around asking people about their medical history?
Mhm.
Like, I don't go around asking you if like you had a mastectomy or if you have a history of alcoholism in your family. Like, that's never been done. But the whatever sort of moral high ground was adopted by
Mhm.
people to be able to go around to like, ask, like, we saw that there are people who were willing to report on other people, like, oh, they're having a house party during like, and tell on their neighbor, like, that stuff does exist.
Yeah, and it exists, and outside of that too.
I realized I just said it too.
Oh,
I'm trying to
I
avoid
think
the
we're
little
dads.
banner on Spotify, but I'll pull it out too. I
Yeah,
have so
we'll have
many
to pull
things
that
to
one
bleep
out.
out of this. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, kind of got carried away.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it is strange to me because I feel like there is a fear and a willingness to do that to like your fellow citizen.
It comes from, I didn't mean to cut
Mhm.
you off, but before I forget, it comes from a case in all of this red flag laws, the last 3 years during the pandemic. It comes from a feeling of helplessness.
Mhm.
And Uncle Ted's manifesto goes through this at all. We have very little autonomy in many parts of our lives. And so by being able to feel as though I can invoke a red flag law on somebody, I can call the police or whatever the state government was at the time who was enforcing the laws during the lockdowns, that gives me some form of control. And so I am going to wield that because that is the only thing I have in, whatever arena it is that makes me feel like I have some sort of control over my life. And I think that's where that comes from.
This might be also unpopular. That is a dangerous person to me. Someone who is
How's it
willing to be,
unpopular?
I don't
That's an
know.
excellent take. What do you mean?
Like that is a dangerous person to me. Someone who is they need that power or
It's
they
the
need to
HOA
feel
president. Yeah,
yes, the
exactly.
HOA president. That is yeah, that is just a really that's someone who shouldn't be in power.
No,
That's someone who shouldn't, in my opinion, have a right to own. I mean, everyone
no.
has a right to whatever, but
Yeah,
that's someone who should not own weapons, is someone who needs to have that
the dictator.
power,
Yeah.
yeah, over someone. And I don't know, it's interesting to see that play out in real world. And the other thing too is the ease for like suing each other here.
Oh,
You
everything's so.
sue someone over anything.
Yeah.
And I think I was always aware of this stuff. I don't know that I really started paying attention to it until I used to live in a different country for a while. And that stuff, it just is not
Hmm.
present there. Like you would never have something like a red flag law on a citizen or sue another citizen for something or like rat them out to the police or something like that. I don't know. And it's interesting to have one idea of what we
Right.
want America to be like, but then it's kind of like you pull back the veil and where does that fear and that need for power come from?
Yeah. My theory is it's a lack of autonomy.
Yeah.
I go to, and it sounds so bad to say I pull stuff from the Unabomber's manifesto, but honestly, and when I talked about it, I circled back several times saying, listen, by reading this thing and by saying I agree with parts of this paper does not mean I agree with this dude or his actions by any means, but objectively, the words on that paper are shockingly
Hmm.
relevant for what's going on today. And he actually doesn't talk, may have referenced what he did like once in passing. And it's not a call to bomb or send bombs in the mail or to like do anything like that. He basically just breaks down why, we are the way we are in modern society today. Um, and so when I go around telling people to read it, they think I'm fucking nuts. Like just read like the intro. Read
Yeah.
the intro. It's meme to hell. But he was a super high IQ, I guess, as well. He's a
Hmm.
very intelligent guy. His brain was also fried in the MK Ultra experiments, which isn't. I'm not even making that up. It's a real thing. So, which is weird that somehow Manson was as well.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, crazy how the government just fry your brain, and then when he goes off on the government, it's a big deal. But yeah, I think a lot of that is a lack of autonomy, and people
Hmm.
feel powerless because, again, going back to voting, Voting's our only interaction that most of us have with government today. And because it seems no matter which side you're on, because again, they'll give up whatever it is in the name of votes. So, like, Roe v. Wade, for example, Biden's in office, you voted for Biden, whatever, you have a Democrat controlled Senate, whatever it is, in the House, whatever, and yet still somehow, Roe v. Wade gets pulled away. If you're voting for left, typically you support that. You're going to feel like, well, what the fuck? It doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
what I do at that point. And the same thing is going to happen for those whenever, the next guy gets into office, or when Trump was in office, for example, he passed one of the most um, aggressive gun control bills we had ever seen since the assault weapons ban way back in the day. And people were like, what the fuck? Like, we voted for you. Why are you doing this? And so people feel as though it doesn't really matter at a
Mm-hmm.
certain point. They know that whatever they like, whatever they hold dear, will be sacrificed very quickly in the name of the longevity for whatever representative they voted for. And so I think any sort of thing that they can latch onto to feel as though they can secure some sort of power or autonomy in their life is where that sort of drive to, rat on somebody else really comes from. And so that's just my take, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too that gets tricky in those conversations, and again, it all comes down to the other person you're talking to, and I think their willingness to like listen and to rationalize with you. And this is actually probably why I preface a lot of the stuff that I say
Hmm.
with like, I'm not hating on America by saying
Well,
this, or like
I
I'm
mean,
not
and the same thing when I
XYZ.
read from industrial, society and its future, I have
Yeah.
to be like, I'm not I do not like what he did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because I've always gotten backlash comments
Hmm.
like you say these things and you say them as if you don't like it here, like you don't agree with XYZ,
Yeah.
but it's not that, but why I can't respect just blindly living
I'm not going to
somewhere.
say this is the
I'm
best
not going to
place ever. Shut
say,
the fuck up.
yeah,
Yeah. Like, no.
like of course I have so many freedoms
Yeah.
living here, especially as a woman that I wouldn't have if I lived somewhere else.
Right.
And that's fantastic. And there are so many things, we're just so privileged
Hmm.
to have here. But that doesn't mean that on the same token, I have to say this is the single greatest place in the world and I will support
I will not
every
complain about
yeah,
shit.
I won't
Yeah.
complain about anything. Like you should want the place that you're living to actively be better, regardless of what the hell you think
Yeah.
politically or, anything. You should want it to be better and you should advocate for that. And I think we get caught up in that too, where it's like if you say one thing against it, it's like, what? You're not patriotic and
Oh my God. I forgot
Mhm.
what's the term for that? There's a great meme about that and how a lot of the discourse does end up going that way, where it's
Mhm.
like, because I say one thing, you immediately assume that I'm against this other unrelated thing.
Yes, yeah,
And that's
exactly.
completely invalid.
That's not what I'm saying
But
at all.
because we
Yeah.
take those shortcuts in our head, though, we have to sort of have those stereotypes, and it's the product of evolution, the
Hmm.
stereotype. Um, and so, yeah, I know exactly what
Hmm.
you're saying, but we have to really work to avoid that, because it's just not
Yeah.
true. Because again, by you saying, "Oh, I lean somewhat to the left," and I
Hmm.
immediately go, "Oh, so you want red flag laws, you don't want me
Yeah.
to own guns." That's a completely,
And then here I'm telling you, I think red flag laws
yeah,
are I don't like them.
and
I mean, I
you
just learned
like
about
voting
them an
while
hour
cheating, yeah.
ago,
So
but
like, it's a very dangerous thing, and that's how we end up isolating
hmm,
ourselves and others.
yeah.
That's a good way to, sort of. That was a really good way to actually tie a bow on that.
There you go.
Yeah, that was very nice. You're gonna say something else though. I'm not trying to add. I'm not trying to land
Um,
the plane here. I was just
no,
saying
no,
that was
no.
very, very good
Now I'm
way
trying
to.
to think what I was gonna say.
Sorry.
I don't really, no, it's fine. I don't really remember.
So we just talked about what I want to talk about. Do you have anything you want to talk about?
No, we
We
I
just
think
had
we
a
said it all.
very unorganized rant about something I had a very unorganized document on, but I think it kind of makes sense.
Hmm.
Don't always assume the worst, because likely the worst is never going to happen. But if
Yeah.
you continue thinking it's going to happen, it will, or something like it likely will happen,
Hmm.
and you're not going to feel good. Anyways, and maybe rethink about voting and getting involved. I think I got to figure out how to get more involved.
Yeah, I think there's more to do than we realize
Yeah.
on a smaller scale and
But it's not
just
just
not
one, it's not
doing
either one of those one things. It's got to
no.
be a whole,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, like anything in life, there's no shortcut. There's
Hmm.
no easy way.
And I think too, sometimes when we're not directly involved in something and whatever the, body is that we're not directly involved with that serves us
Hmm.
and doesn't serve us necessarily in the way that we want, we think the worst about it.
Yes.
Like the government is 100% out to get me. This politician, whatever, like I voted for them, they didn't do what I wanted them to do. I think we sometimes just see a big picture and it's very like, all right, well, this thing
Hmm.
sucks. Getting involved in it makes you realize, at least this has been, and I'll try to vaguely touch on it because I don't want to
Yeah.
give too much information, but getting involved, I think helps you to realize like, okay, not everyone is nefarious and
Hmm.
out to get you. And there are some people who want to do the right thing. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who don't. And so
Yep.
that, their work probably doesn't really break through. And the example I was going to give for that is, we both went to college, like have higher ed degrees, but there are things in a university where I would always complain and be
Hmm.
like, why does the university do this? I feel like they're just, taking money, or like
Yep.
it's so ridiculous. Like these resources aren't available to students. I always had that mindset. And then I had a chance to serve on a board for a university, and it completely changed my mindset and actually made me start thinking a lot more about like politics
Hmm.
and government as well, because you just don't see what goes on in the day-to-day stuff. And it was very inspiring, I will say, like how much these people who have high standing and ability to make decisions genuinely care. And this could be specific to this one place. I'm
Sure.
sure everywhere is different. I'm sure there were still things going on that, you don't always get to see.
Mhm.
But the amount of effort that these people put into actually making sure that things were serving the students, maybe not, always the
Yeah.
case, but for the most part, it really was. It just completely changed my opinion and made me think like, okay, if I'm not doing anything to learn about the inner workings, I can't complain about
Right.
the overall structure. Like, I can't just say that, well, this university sucks. Like, they're taking money from me. Like, where is that coming from? And who's making those decisions? What
Mhm.
decisions are being made? Where is the budget coming from? Where is it actually being allocated to? So it was a whole learning experience, and I understand that's like an extreme example, and
But no,
we're not
I
going to
think
get that
I
into
think
it,
that's a
but
really good example actually, because that's how I obviously think about government. Like y'all,
mhm,
you people are fucking useless. You just take my money and you shoot my dog if you don't like what I'm doing. That's all you guys do. And again, without knowing the inner workings, it's not the healthiest way maybe to think about it, even though I've always said it's important to think about it like that. I do think it just from I am someone who just likes to know
yeah,
how things work. I'm somebody who just likes to understand a concept like that. And so now as I'm kind of going down this transition from black to maybe more so gray pill, I am more interested in getting involved because I just kind of sit around and bitch. Like I don't really do anything about it. And so getting involved and kind of seeing and learning and hearing, if anything, maybe it just confirms what how I feel,
hmm
but maybe also get a different perspective too. And both of those are equally as valuable, but you won't know until you get involved,
yeah,
really. Yeah. So I think that was a really good example.
good. Yeah, I think involvement is just a huge thing. Like you can't. I almost felt like, what right do I have
Yeah.
complain if I'm not doing anything to try to
Almost
learn?
going back to the waterfall, the second question:
Yeah.
am I entitled to feel this way? And
hmm
maybe that's obviously tied to that question.
hmm
Like, does it impact me? Yes, but also like, do I fully understand how, why, do I completely understand the entire concept of
hmm
this thing that's making me angry? And I think, ooh, that's a big hawk.
Does it have? Oh no, I thought it had something, but that's a red tail, right?
I think so. So, I went full dad right there. Whoa, hawk!
Hawk.
It's like the dad driving. Deer, deer,
Yeah.
deer, deer. Yeah, yeah. We got a lot of big birds around here. Like that buzzard the other day
Yeah.
flew up on that cell tower.
Surprisingly a
He's got a
lot.
nest in that cell tower. I'd be a little nervous if I'm him though, and I see that guy.
That is a huge bird.
That hawk is
Yeah.
been. There's a lot of squirrels around here though. That hawk's been eating very good.
He's chunky.
As a big boy.
He's thick.
Always, we got a lot of rabbits too.
That makes me sad. I don't want to
Also,
watch this hawk scoop a rabbit.
I do know actually. I think I know why that buzzard is chilling there. This train that runs by here. I think it hits a lot of
Oh,
animals.
yeah,
Yeah, I
probably.
remember I was working on my car and there were kids like running along the tracks, and someone was like, "Whoa, deer skull!" So
Oh,
I think a lot of deer end up getting hit by the train.
that makes a lot of sense why you see bigger birds around here then
Yeah.
too.
So I know hawks really. They're not. I think they will be opportunistic eaters. I think any animal will.
Mhm.
They're typically not. Gonna like feast off of someone that's already dead. But I know that those buzzards, those vultures will.
Did you ever figure out what it meant for that hawk that was on the ground?
No, I don't know what that thing was doing. Maybe it
That
missed
was so
something and it
cool,
was
though.
just chilling. I've never
He
seen
was
one
just
standing on the
staring at his
ground though.
legs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but if he took off, he's fine. So
And he let me get, I mean, within 5 feet of him, just standing there,
that's
just
pretty
looking down
cool.
at his legs.
That's so
Yeah.
cool.
He would
Wish
just
I
like,
didn't need to have a certain license to own a hawk. That'd be sweet.
oh,
Any bird of prey, you need to be like some sort of zookeeper or some
mm,
sort of, I don't know, you need some sort of credential. Like an owl, I think an owl would be so cool.
ooh, owls are cool.
Those eyes are the coolest things
Mhm.
ever. He's chilling up there.
He is chilling. He's looking for lunch.
Oh yeah, it is past lunchtime.
I guarantee you, just talked for another 2 hours.
Oh yeah, an
I'm
hour
s-
40, hour 45 in almost.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's not too bad.
No, not bad at all. I mean, I did start recording before we realized. So I'll
Yeah, that's
probably
true.
like phase it in a little, after we talked. But yeah, we talked a lot about what I want to talk about.
Good.
We talked about whatever you want to talk about.
I was just here for bouncing conversation off of today. I
Well,
don't
thank
have
you.
any, specific
What about
topics.
some? I'm not going to do dad advice because
Oh,
dad advice is taken by too many people. What about? Because I'm only going to assume most of the listeners are going to be guys here. What would be your advice? What's some womanly advice?
in all of life, just my
Yeah,
overall womanly advice.
what's your sort of advice you'd impart on this generation or maybe guys, or it doesn't have to be just guys, but in general to this generation? Doesn't have to be tied to this episode. I'd rather it
Um,
not be. I'd rather it be your personal.
okay. In general, I think people need to do things alone more often.
Okay.
I think, especially in this generation, we're so terrified of
Mm-hmm.
being alone, even just like with our own thoughts for 5 minutes. It's why we're addicted to TikTok and Instagram. And,
True.
like we can't just be alone ever. Yeah. So I don't know. I say do more things alone. And even if it like going out into public alone is such a big thing
Yes.
for people that they get afraid of, like go do things by yourself. If you want to go like try a new restaurant but nobody can go do it. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not we get so caught up in "Oh, what are people going to think about me if I'm like out here doing this thing alone?" Nobody gives a fuck.
Yeah.
Like literally nobody cares and you will waste so much of your life waiting for other people to do things
Yeah.
with. Like just go do things on your own, have experiences. You become a much more enjoyable person too because then you actually know what you like and who you are. And then I don't know, you're just a more I don't want to say well rounded, but like you get to know yourself more and then what you can give to other people I think is more beneficial.
I completely agree. And actually, that was my ninth video I made.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
this is
Oh,
like being
nice.
alone.
Yeah.
Yep. I talk about living alone and all. I think that's
Yeah.
very good advice.
Well, I mean, I spent like quite a few months in a place where it was just me. Like I
Yeah.
moved out of the States. I didn't know anyone where I was moving to. I mean, I knew like the person I was going there to work for,
Sure.
but in terms of like people my age and stuff, like I didn't know anyone and it was I feel like now coming back from that experience, I just know so much more about myself. And also I had the best time and like I just truly did whatever I wanted and went wherever I wanted and yeah, I don't know. It was just such a cool thing to do stuff alone. And I don't know that I would have done that previously
Hmm. That's cool.
because there is such a stigma around it, right? It's like, well, I
Oh,
don't want
yeah.
to be seen like doing this by myself or like, oh, no one can go. Like, I guess I won't go or,
And that's so easy now, especially with like phones, where you
hmm
feel like you're involved or you're plugged in or
hmm
you're partaking in, actually communicating with or like sharing experiences with people because you're seeing everyone's life, but you're not.
you're not.
And so people won't go out to the bar by themselves when like,
hmm
I forget what the statistic is, but like our generation, the younger generations like aren't like dating as
hmm
much as they used to because they're not talking, they're not meeting
They're
with
not talking to
people.
people. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's a very, very good piece of advice.
That's my advice.
Cool.
It's not
So,
really womanly
no,
advice.
I
It's
think
not.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's good advice because mine would have been something else, probably related to one of my tisms. So,
hmm
I think that's really good advice. So, I think wrap ups are don't catastrophize. Ask yourself, why do I feel this way? Should I feel this way? Am I entitled to feel this way, rather? And do I want to feel this way?
hmm
Um, get involved I think for no other reason, it's better than sitting around hoping something awful happens. Maybe it's just another Sisyphus parable for you, but still,
Your reason to get involved can also just be because you want to learn more.
yeah,
Like that's okay too. It doesn't have
yeah,
to be like I'm getting involved because I'm gonna, end up really changing a lot of stuff. Like you maybe won't in the situation you're getting involved in, but you're just learning more, and I think
yeah,
that's okay too.
agreed. And then be comfortable being alone. Do
Hmm.
things alone. Cool. Well, thank you
Yeah.
for joining
Thanks for
again
having
for
me
another
back.
long episode, of course.
Yeah.
And this audio is much better. I can already tell.
Good. Okay.
I felt so bad the last one. I ran that through. I layered several AI like echo enhancers on it, and it warped it a little bit, but it sounded so much better than the raw audio. I felt so bad.
And we talked for so long too. There was
Yeah,
such a large
it
file
was
that I had to
bad.
try to edit and
Yeah, I fucked up.
mhm.
I fucked up. But anyways, do you want to tell? Want to sign it off? Just say all I have to do is just tell them to stay metal.
Stay metal.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks for having me.